Rogue Radio. Now available on Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. Keep it rogue.
Hey guys, this is of course brought to you by Rogue Country and Rogue Radio. Please go check us out. I've started doing a radio show over on mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. I've been enjoying the hell out of it. I'm playing a lot of stuff that I just want to listen to. It's stuff that I'm a fan of. I'm lucky to be friends with some of these people. I respect the hell out of these artists, so please go check out those shows on mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. I hope you're keeping well. Thank you so much for listening to episode 32 of Into the Van. I'm so excited about this episode. If you're new to Into the Van, welcome. I really hope you stick around. Go check out previous episodes. This is my first kind of foray into talking to people outside of the music or comic book industry. This is my first filmmakers, and I'm so fucking happy that Small Town Monsters, Seth and Adrienne agreed to do it. If you haven't listened to my other podcast, please go back and check it out. There is a wealth of talent from these artists and a wealth of information. If you're not necessarily a musician, you can still find value in these talks because it's all about motivation and inspiration. That's what I always want out of this podcast. If you have been listening to Into the Van, thank you so much. You guys are the best. You don't know how much I appreciate you listening. And if you've listened to this, you of course know today we are brought to you by The Next Life, my debut record. If you want to check it out, it means the world to me. You know, I wrote this as I was, going through some personal and musical changes. I wanted to do a full-length record to capture that. So it's from work to love to loss to just living in the moment, celebrating your friend group. You know, everyone goes through changes and you need a soundtrack to those things. Sometimes I wrote my soundtrack, and I hope if you listen to it, it may bring some comfort to you, may bring some joy, and may just help you get through it. That's what The Next Life is all about. I'm going to drop your teaser for you here now.
Work on my daughter, work on my son, work on like your father until the day is done. Work until you can't. Work until you bleed. Work until you won't. Oh, the machine. Then you ask yourself, am I free? And you ask yourself, am I free?
And if you dig it, please check out Mike333west.com. And yeah, I'm really fucking proud of this record. I hope you listen to it. If you have listened to it, thank you so much. Please let me know what you think. Without further ado, this is Small Town Monsters. I'm so excited to talk to Seth and Adrienne. I'm so happy they said yes. They are, in my opinion, the best, unexplained, cryptid UFO documentary filmmakers out there. They have such an unbiased, honest approach to their subject matters that you can't help but respect it. I've been writing a song called Mothman, which will be out at some point this year. I watched their Mothman of Point Pleasant documentary and Mothman Legacy documentaries just for research to get a feel of the subject matter. And yeah, I backed them on Kickstarter. I'm a huge fucking fan of these guys. So, let's do it up. Episode 32 of Into the Van with Mike West and Small Town Monsters. Welcome to Into the Van with me, Mike West. Cool. So we're rolling in. Let me just say first off, congrats on the Kickstarter wrapped up. Was it the beginning of March that wrapped up?
Yeah, it was, I think March 5th that finished this year. And we had no idea what to expect. It was our seventh Kickstarter?
Yeah, this was the seventh.
Our seventh Kickstarter, but obviously the first Kickstarter we've ever done in the middle of a pandemic. So we had no idea what to expect, and we were kind of blown away by how successful it was, and relieved, obviously. We had really prepared ourselves for kind of a
failure.
Not for we didn't raise our goal higher than last year like we normally would. We weren't expecting to gain any new backers or anything like that, and it really did not turn out that way at all. It was really surprising.
Yeah, I think we expected it to hit even with last year, maybe even a little bit under. We didn't know what to expect. So when we knew within the first 20 minutes it was going to be fine, because usually we spend the entire launch night. We do this like live launch party on the Facebook thing. We usually, my wife and I, everyone else has a blast, but Adrienne and I have it's extremely tense for the both of us.
I always say it's the worst day of my year. Because I just, especially this year, I was driving to the office before the launch party, and I was just telling myself, like, well, if it doesn't make it this year, we had a great run. And I was really preparing myself for the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And we were good within the first 20 minutes. Well, heck, within the first 10 minutes, we had raised like $16,000 in the first like 10, 15 minutes. So we kind of knew it was going to hit the goal. And then from there, it was just figuring out how far beyond the goal it would go, and what we would do, how we would manage all that, how we would manage the funds that came in. I mean, like a typical STM production anymore costs in their neighborhood of like 15 to 20,000. I don't know if that includes, sometimes that includes some of our marketing, which would be things like the posters, and sometimes it doesn't. But when you think about the fact that we have 4 feature films coming out this year, the Kickstarter hit 83,000. So that really helps cover all those projects. But then we also have On the Trail of Haunting, we have Paranormal Unexplained, we have On the Trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman, we have Beyond the Trail launching this year. So we have like 8 or at least 8 projects launching, probably more than that.
That's absolutely incredible. Like, I backed this Kickstarter as well. I only backed the digital one just because postage for the US has been absolutely crazy lately. But I've been stoked to see that you went over that target. And what I've really respected from you guys, and what's really inspiring, is how many projects you have in the line. Where sometimes with Kickstarters, it's like, if you fund us, we'll do this one thing. But you guys are going, if you do this, we're going to do these, 8 or more projects.
Yeah, and I think the coolest thing that's happened in the last 2 years about those Kickstarters, and I'm hoping with time this becomes a bigger deal to people, but because of the fact that we signed a distribution deal with a major distributor, it means that distributor is setting the launch date for the titles. We completely ignore that when it comes to our Kickstarter backers. So the backers in this year is going to be kind of wild, because
it's essentially like months advance copy.
Yeah.
So,
like On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey, they just set 1091 just set the release date for June 3rd, and Kickstarter backers are going to get that in mid-April.
Oh, awesome.
So it's like, I mean, the thing we haven't seen long-term is if that affects the release of the movie in any way. Because one thing we did like about putting out the movies closer to their actual release date was, we were thinking, hopefully word of mouth.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't know that really gets the traction it once did with social media algorithms and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think, like, I'm a musician, so from like that kind of mindset, it is interesting, because I release my record on like Bandcamp first, or there's a single first, and it doesn't really impact the sales of the album going forward or when you launch it. And having that kind of loyalty to the people who backed you, like, instills further loyalty. So I think it's a great idea to have kind of like an April and then a June release date for things, because it shows the value of when people put their money down for it.
Right. Yeah. I like that. Is that a Spider-Man chair in the background, or?
Yeah, that's a Spider-Man blanket my mate got me for my chair in my office.
Our son would love it.
Yeah. I have my nephew at some point will eventually stay over, and his
Yeah.
bed's all ready for him.
Yeah,
But,
cool.
yeah. But going, back before Small Town Monsters and things, how did you two guys like meet? And obviously before all this adventure began, where did you guys like meet up?
We met talking about Grant Morrison comic books in a in a bar in Massillon, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anyone else that knew who Grant Morrison even was at that point in my life, so I was pretty pumped about that. And then we both were like,
Well, I'm sure that's not true.
my brother, I did a comic book podcast, so I actually knew quite a few people, but I didn't know any pretty girls. Morrison was. So we hit it off about that and like Scott Pilgrim, and
then we didn't see each other again for months.
yeah, we didn't see each other for like half a year, and then we bumped into each other one night, and it took off from there. But I mean, we started a podcast. Was that before we were married?
It was right before we got married.
Right before we were getting married, and then like kind of after, right, like just in the very early days of our marriage, we actually did a podcast called Pod Pie together. We only did like 8 episodes, but we actually did talk about like some of this kind of like paranormal stuff on the show.
We had some UFO episodes and Bigfoot episodes.
Yeah, like monsters. I think we talked a little bit about occasionally.
Probably.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. How long have you guys been married now?
What is it? It's
I
2013.
I think it'll be
whatever
8
that
years.
breaks down to.
I think this will be 8 years.
Oh,
It's 8
incredible! Yeah, I'm getting married myself in October. I'm really excited for it and things. So,
Congratulations!
Thank you so much. But with obviously you guys been married and things. 2013, 2015 was when Minerva Monster came out. What was the conversation to like launch Small Town Monsters and begin this journey of it? Was it like it's going to be part-time and we're going to see if it takes off, or we're going to take a gamble and go into this?
Well, it was a really long process. When Seth started Minerva to
2014
becoming a full-time job. I mean, well, first of all, I should say that Minerva started as a book. Seth has been a writer for a long time, and so when he started working on it, it was book form. And like Seth already mentioned, we still are both really into comics, readers and things like that. So a lot of the time we spent outside of working together was spent doing things like reading or writing. So it just kind of organically started happening in our free time. And then when Seth met some guys who had film equipment, and they kind of decided to see if this translated into a documentary, we're just kind of like, yeah, sure, we can do this on the weekends. And
Minerva was different from anything we've done since because we spent a lot of time making it.
Yeah, it's a very long production process.
Yeah, I mean, we started filming in like September of 2014, and we shot like the last interview in like February of 2015. So like it was for us, that's extended. And then but what did happen is like in December of 2014, the first newspaper article, not the first one, but the first big one, the first big newspaper article about us making that movie came out, and it was in the Akron Beacon Journal. And that kind of like kicked off all this attention toward the movie months before it was coming out.
Yeah, and I think up until that point, I mean, not to speak for you, but I think it was just kind of like I really want this story to get out there. The plans were to release it on YouTube, and we didn't really have any like huge ideas of what was going to happen with this movie. But then when press kind of started covering it, Seth started taking it a lot more seriously.
Well, not more seriously, just like I think I started like looking at the long-term possibilities of it. And then we formed an LLC for Small Town Monsters around that time. And then we started looking at like, well, maybe we can make another movie.
Keep the momentum.
Yeah. And so what happened is the movie Minerva premiered in May of 2015 at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. The day before it premiered, I went into work and just I think we had talks about it before, but nothing extensive. And I just said to Adrienne, I think I'm going to go down to part-time at medical billing and just focusing on filmmaking. Is that okay with you? Because she basically had to carry the financial load for a little while. And she was cool with it. So that day, like the day before we left for Cambridge, Ohio to do the premiere, I actually went into my boss and told him, I'm going down to part-time, if that's cool with you guys. And I basically just started going into work like 15, 20 hours a week and spent the rest of my time working on STM.
You also spent a lot of that time at work.
Even when I was at work, I was mostly focusing on it. So and then we made the announcement. We also made the announcement at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference that our next movie was Beast of Whitehall, which we'd be making in New York. And then, and then that kind of like started the ball rolling on although I always say what actually started the ball rolling on like the crazy production schedule that we're on now was that Adrienne got pregnant, because we were, that would have been 2016. Yes, we still were kind of like lollygagging our way from movie to movie at that point. Like one was coming out per year. We put out one in 2015, and then Beast of Whitehall was going to come out in 2016. It came out in April. We went and filmed Boggy Creek Monster, and then Adrienne got pregnant later that summer. I was like, oh crap, I have to help support my family. And so I started working really hard on finishing Boggy, and then immediately after Boggy came out, we went and shot Mothman, and then Invasion, and then that kind of like started the ball rolling on 2 per year. And then the next year after 2017 is when I went to 3. But I mean, 2017 is the big year because Mothman Point Pleasant came out in June, and I mean, I still remember everything that happened during that like month period. But Mothman came out. We had Tommy. Tommy was like 8 weeks old. Yeah, he's like 8 weeks old. And we were filming Invasion on Chestnut Ridge down in Pennsylvania. And we just happened to be there the day that that Mothman came out on Amazon. Our movies had actually been fairly successful on Amazon. But we saw something with that release that we hadn't seen before and we haven't seen since. And that was like Mothman came out on a Friday night at midnight, Thursday night at midnight kind of thing. And by noon the next day, when we were getting to our first interview in PA, it was circling the top 10 in horror on new releases. So it was like 12 hours after it had come out. And we got to our rental house that night. We shot all day, got to our rental house that night, got into the rental house that night and turned on we put it on the smart TV in the living room, and it was on the featured page on Amazon. And I went into the bestseller release, and we were #1 in horror.
Oh, incredible.
But what was wild was we were in the top like 15 or 20 overall. And so that was like, because we were passing up movies like Rogue One. And I was like, okay, this is going to be strange. And the next morning we were in the top 10. So we've never seen it since. I just remember that we were literally sitting there cheering for the movie to pass up Logan. And when it happened, it was like, I mean, utterly bizarre, because the movie cost like $7,000-8,000 to make. It cost less than Boggy. And it was passing up these mega $1 million blockbuster films. And then that kind of like changed everything. We came home from that shoot, and Adrienne was supposed to go back to work from maternity leave. And the day she was supposed to go back, I just told her, oh, I think we should just focus on this full time. She was crying too, because she didn't really feel like leaving Tommy at that point, And she's like, all right. And so she went back to work for 2 weeks. She gave him her 2-week notice, went back to work for 2 weeks, came home, and then never went back.
Well, I worked from home very part-time for a little while after that, and then just kind of phased out. But.
Yeah. I mean, but that was like Mothman kind of gave us the key to moving into this full-time. And from there, it's just kind of like grown each year.
That's so cool. Like that is one of the things I really wanted to talk to. And when it was both of you were coming onto this, I was really excited because I wanted to see what kind of like the story was behind that. Because when you're in a creative field, having the partner who gets it and is willing to support you just makes it so much better. And when you were saying it's like it's not necessarily taking it more serious, but when the next level happens and you're like, oh shit, this could be a thing. When you decide to take it with two hands, it is really a game changer.
Yeah, it's also kind of terrifying because like I mean, it was we owned a house, all the typical adult things that you're supposed to be doing, and we had a son,
Yeah.
So it was like,
But we always, and we still do, but we always try to keep our expectations very low. Like when we went for it, we were like, well, we'll do it for this year, and then we'll evaluate where we're at, see if one of us needs to, go back to work part-time.
yeah, and just like,
oh, maybe if we need to replace a car at that point, one of us is going to go back to work full-time.
yeah, like peek behind the curtain, there is not a year that goes by where I don't at some point claim I'm probably going to have to go back to working. I'm doing it. Like that still happens almost every year. Because I mean, the fact is, like, what we do is incredibly difficult to navigate completely independently, which is kind of the goal here. We don't have investors. We have crowdfunding, and that's cool because we're giving back to the people that support it. But we don't do like investments and stuff like that. And I don't think I could handle the stress of that, in all honesty. So every year we have some new challenge. Like this year, Amazon's just announced that they're blocking all documentaries from going to Amazon Prime. And that seems to be some sort of weird rule now is basically any independently produced documentary they're saying will no longer be allowed on Prime. And Amazon's always been a huge part of our revenue stream, the biggest. Because
I was going to say, obviously, with Mothman breaking on Amazon, I did see, I think it was through the Small Town Monsters community on Facebook that article came up. Do you think, like with, Shudder or someone, would that be somewhere to kind of approach as an option or something?
What? I'm sorry, what did you say?
So with Amazon, like having issues with these documentaries and things, would you approach Shudder, who do their originals? Yeah, the horror streaming service.
Yeah, I mean that would be cool. Something like that would be cool. But we had talked to them at one point, and it didn't seem to be something that they were into. I mean, the fact is too, Amazon's such a huge revenue stream, and audience on there is so massive that something like On the Trail of UFOs had over 8 million views in its first year, which I would assume would put it in competition with some of the bigger UFO shows that are on TV today. At that, that you're basically that averages out to like 1 million views per episode, a show with no marketing, no money, all that kind of stuff. So that to make up what would be lost by that would be substantial. I mean, we are lucky in that we're in this partnership with 1091.
That came at a very good time.
Yeah, that kept us alive through 2020, honestly. So basically like every year is it's like an obstacle course, or like it's like we've been thrown into Thunderdome. And it's a challenge just to stay alive. But I mean, thankfully too, like year to year, despite the fact that every year is like this, every year we manage to grow somehow. So we just stay alive.
Yeah. Well, I think it helps too that we're pretty creative people, so we're always kind of looking for something new or different to do as well. So we never want to just keep doing the same thing we've always done.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, you'll see that with the things that we're starting to do with YouTube and things like our membership and On the Trail of Hauntings. So
yeah, and Adrienne's that we have a book production or a book, what is it called?
Publishing.
A book publishing company that we're getting off the ground now too. So we definitely like to challenge ourselves.
We don't like free time.
We hate free time.
We don't like to relax.
Oh. Well, that was one of my questions, because I've seen your production schedules, and from the YouTube channels to Monsteropolis and the podcasts and everything. What do you guys actually do in your downtime? Is there, like, obviously you're comic fans? Is it like, do you focus on reading comics, or is it is it just thinking of the next idea to take Small Town Monsters to the next level?
Well, Seth really got into sports after we had our son. So
I became your typical middle-aged dad.
He watches a lot of sports to kind of unwind. I do a lot of art myself. So if I'm not working and I'm just kind of doing things to pass the time, I'm usually painting or something. But
I got into what I've gotten into in the last year. Oops.
Sorry.
What I've gotten into in the last year is like survivalist guys on YouTube. And I don't know why, because that's not me at all. Thing all done upstairs.
Okay.
Sorry, our son's in the bath issue. But yeah, I don't know what happened, but at some point I got into survivalist guys on YouTube. So I've been watching a lot of that stuff. And then a lot of like vloggers and things like that. And then I've always like been obsessed with just learning more about filmmaking. So basically, like, a day doesn't go past where I'm not either watching filmmaking tutorials or reading interviews with like my favorite directors or filmmakers. Adrienne is currently upstairs helping her child in the bathroom. So, but she actually reads way more than I do. I've fallen off a cliff in terms of reading, but I think what I do still read a lot is like like filmmaking books. And then like right before we just got back from filming Howl of the Rougarou in Louisiana. And right before that, I couldn't find, our movies tend to run two like creative paths. Either I approach them with a very firm stylistic idea in mind. I want to make a movie that kind of like has this style, or I come to those stories and sort of find the style in the making of it. And the Rougarou was like one where I have sort of been figuring it out as we're going, but because of that, it forced me to really spend a lot of time learning about Louisiana and more about the state itself and the area we were going to film. So like leading up to filming that, I actually spent like 3-4 hours 2 or 3 days a week at the office reading books about Louisiana and watching like Louisiana documentaries and stuff like that, just to get myself, because I don't know anything about that area. So we have a ton of books at the office. Like we're basically building an STM library at the office. So that's where I do most of my reading these days.
Oh, amazing. And just on a quick tangent, have you seen like the Invincible series that's come out on Amazon from Rob Kirkman? I
haven't seen the series, but Invincible back in the day was one of my favorite comics because I loved Ryan Otley's artwork and I like Kirkman a lot. Kirkman, I mean, I never got into The Walking Dead, but Kirkman was one of those guys where there's only 3 dudes like this that I can think of. One is Kevin Smith, the other is Tarantino, and then Robert Kirkman, where I'll digest their content and then I want to create my own almost immediately. And I don't know what it is about those 3 guys, but they're all, I'm not like a huge massive fan of any of them, but just the I guess of the work. I like the work. I'm not like obsessed with it, but if I watch or whatever, read their stuff, I want to do my own thing because it's something about the way they do it puts me in the like creative mode. But no, I haven't seen. I love the comic.
Yeah, I read the first couple of trades of Invincible, so I don't know the full story. And I saw the series coming. I only watched the first episode, but it was incredible. I was proper like hanging off. Like if you can see behind me, I'm a huge comic book fan. I've got like a Walt Simonson and a Salbacina piece or a Ramona Fraden piece up there. Some Man Thing pages from the first issue of like the recent running, 2 Ramita pages up behind my computer and stuff. I'm a huge comic book fan, but I get what you're saying. Like Kevin Smith to me is one of those really inspiring people. Like I love his films. Like I'm a huge fan of those. I came to Jane Silent Bob at the right age of being a stupid teenager, but like to make like my records and stuff, I sold a lot of my comic collection and things, and that was, you know, he did that to Fun Clerks and stuff. And it is weird to see where you can draw inspiration from different, you know, people either in the same medium or slightly different who have that drive. And you know, Kevin Smith has that kind of drive and motivation to him that is inspiring. The same with Tarantino. I think it's when they have a specific vision that they don't let people pander to, like as much. It's really an inspiring thing to see. And that's, again, it's why I really enjoy about your stuff is you have a vision for what you want to do and you find multiple ways to do it.
Yeah. I guess I never. Yeah, it's weird. I think okay, real quick though, did you mean Ramita Senior or Ramita Junior?
Junior. I wish I could get some senior.
Yeah, Junior's pretty cool though. What is it? What is it from? I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I've got a Spider-Man issue 66. I'm a really big fan of the Spider-Man clone Kane. So I've got a splash page of his, and I've got on the way a Man Without Fear Daredevil sketch from a recent sketch he did.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, the first things I really came across of Romita Junior's was the Man Without Fear run with Frank Miller.
So I stole that comic. I stole that comic as a kid from a local bookstore, and that was like the first. That was my introduction to Daredevil. Was Man Without Fear, Ramita Jr. series. I love that little that series.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it, and I saw they were doing a sketch opportunity, so I jumped on that, and I got him to do the black bandana, and he's all bleeding and stuff. So I'm just waiting for that to arrive. But I was obsessed with that, and I saw one of the recent pages went for like $16,000. So I'll never own an original page from that series. So I wanted something that I could get pretty close to. But I'm a huge comic art fan that I try and collect whenever I can.
Super cool. That's if I had like unlimited funds, that would probably be something I do. I have I think I have Mike Waringo was my favorite comic book artist. And I have a Telos. He did a series called Telos at Image back in the day, and I have a book that has some of his original. Well, it's like an original sketch on the cover or something of it.
I think it's hanging on the wall.
It's hanging on our wall in our, but yeah, that's the only other, that one. And then I have a Tim Sale. Tim Sale had a book called Tim Sale in black and white, and he sketched something on the interior for me. And that's about it.
Yeah. I know I'm Daredevil is my favorite character, and I was obsessed with the Frank Miller run because in the UK, there wasn't really comic book shops. So they did UK printings of it was called The Mighty World of Marvel. And they did a Daredevil issue and then a Hulk issue. So they did the whole Frank Miller run as the first issues. I was just obsessed, and I've got a Klaus Janson that I got from a Comic-Con when I met him.
Yeah, see, I love that run too, the Frank Miller Daredevil run, and it's from an era of comics that I actually don't really love. I mean, it's weird because I got into comics in the 80s.
Yeah,
but the actual Daredevil run has aged really. The Frank Miller Daredevil run has aged really well.
Yeah, it's weird to see with comics. Obviously, it's forever changing and resetting, but there's just certain arcs that always just kind of stay current, and they always stay fresh. And wherever anyone goes, I want to get into X, there's always try this run first. And it's really interesting that it's one of the few mediums where there's a big staple in a sea of content, really.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. But going back to Small Town Monsters, you were talking a bit about your process. I've never been involved in a filmmaker and things. What's the initial, from concept to creation, what's the kind of process that you guys take? Has it changed since Minerva?
I'm sure it has. And I kind of feel I think it's different on every title, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think it definitely, each movie kind of becomes its own organic process to some degree.
and it's like I was saying about Rougarou. Like I was really frustrated through the actual shoot, up to the actual shoot, not through it, but I was frustrated up to the actual shoot because I just couldn't find the hook. Like I could, like emotionally, I like to be invested in what we're doing when we're making it, and I felt like two of the highlights over the last couple of years, just in terms of our films, or feature films, not necessarily like the On the Trail of stuff, but two of the highlights were Momo and Bell Witch, because like I don't know what it is about those two projects that I was just able to hook in and run with it, and I didn't have to like find some crazy hook. I was just invested. But at Rougarou, I was having a really hard time getting myself into it, and then I started learning more and more about like the coastal erosion happening in like Louisiana, and for some reason that really like fascinated me. And I think I'm a highfalutin with it, honestly, just because like even during interviews, I was asking people like, do you think like the Rougarou habitat is in danger and stuff? People loved that though. They were like into that idea. Like we interviewed a guy who
we need to make Save the Rougarou.
Yeah. Well, I think the actual tagline for the Rougarou Festival is like support coastal. I forget. There's the saying, the actual like tagline for their Rougarou Festival is something to that effect, like save the habitat of the Rougarou or something. But yeah, I got really into that because like, and every movie I think is different. Like with Bell Witch, I was able I was really emotionally invested in the Bell family and like the history of what went on down there and what happened to them after the haunting ended, and the history of the land itself and all that kind of stuff. And Momo, I got really invested in I guess I got emotionally invested in the family in that case as well, the Harrison family. It's weird because like Mothman Legacy is the one movie that we've made. I was just thinking about this morning. Mothman Legacy is like the one movie we've made where I don't think I ever really emotionally was invested in any aspect of it. That's not to say you can't still tell a good story, and I think we did a good job with that movie, but I was never emotionally, and Adrienne could back me up. I talked about that constantly. Like I couldn't hook into it. But I think it's a good movie. It's just it's definitely not my favorite, and during the making of it I was just constantly frustrated by that fact. So I think the process is different on everyone. It's super different on the Trail Ofs. On the Trail Ofs I really love because I don't have to spend a bunch of time going into it on like, okay, what style is this, what is our style going to be, what do I need to be looking for. We just kind of like go out with cameras and make something, and the style doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to. Those I don't really think those are stylized. They're not supposed to be. It's supposed to be just like, sort of a straightforward documentary adventure film. Now, On the Trail of UFOs, Dark Sky has a style, and it's weird because it's actually starting to morph during the edit, almost like a vaporwave. Like it's taking on this strange like neon 80s vibe as I'm making it, that I'm kind of enjoying. But typically those are much more pick up our cameras and go make something. Whereas the films, we try to have a very set style.
We like to get creative and do something fun and different with each one, which takes up a lot of time too, because, we watch a lot of movies and kind of get an idea of what we're wanting it to look like.
Yep.
And with like documentaries, like, do you have like an idea of the story or the structure that you're going into? Do you have a set way? Because what I really enjoy about your documentaries is, some like crypt documentaries or myths, they go into, either they're super 100% they believe this is real and they just, blindly just, this is the thing that happened. Then you have the complete other end where it's just trying to disprove, and really like you have like an unbiased perspective of these are the facts, these are the people who have seen what they've seen, and we're presenting it in a way that allows you to form your own opinions on it. Like, I've been watching with my partner, and we are talking about, like, well, do you think that actually was a real thing? Like, what do you think they did see? Do you think they actually saw it? Was that a conscious decision to go into these things with? And then what kind of structure do you have for those documentaries?
I think that that's something that just naturally happens, probably largely because of Seth's background in journalism, just kind of presenting things as they happened and then not formulating a personal opinion and inputting that. Because I think, you know, when we're watching rough cuts of the movies, we're kind of having those conversations too. Like, what do you think it was? So I think that that's just kind of Seth's general approach in storytelling, is to just kind of remain on the outside and just take a look in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that carries through to across, whether it's On the Trail of, or, you know, like Mothman Legacy or Momo or Minerva or whatever. Those all have a very objective approach. But the actual, like, when it comes to the structure and all that kind of stuff, the storytelling, I don't go into any of these projects knowing how that is going to play out. And I'm sure there's a lot of like filmmakers, especially documentarians, who would say I'm an idiot for doing it that way. And I probably do create a lot of headaches for myself and for the crew in that approach. But I kind of let the films just the storytelling find itself during the edit. And because to me, that's where actual directing, when it comes to documentaries, that's where the actual directing takes place. That's where the story of the movie kind of comes into view for us. There's exceptions to that. Like, structurally, we knew making On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Journey that it was going to be a day-by-day process, and you haven't seen the movie yet because it doesn't come out apparently till June or May for Kickstarters. But that movie's been done since January, and the movie's split into days. So it's like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And we knew making it while we were filming it that was going to be the case. So we filmed as much of each day as we could. I'm trying to think if there's ever been any other issue, I guess Momo, we kind of had a blueprint during the actual filming of it for how it was going to go. So we knew with that one, we knew, you know, like the example though of not knowing is like Terror in the Skies, where we made that movie and it wasn't until the edit where I was like, oh, you know what? Like, this movie breaks down really nicely into geographic sections of the state of Illinois, where we can do 3 sections, 3 chapters to the movie. Chapter 1 is like the southern part of the state. We'll go through introducing the idea of winged cryptids. We'll introduce the idea of, my door just keeps slowly opening on its own. We'll go through the introduction of the idea that, like, there are crumbling sections of the Midwest, and a lot of the central themes of the movie are introduced there. And then the second chapter, where you get into like Lawndale and the middle portion of the state where there's hardly any towns remaining, and then getting into the cities and all that. That was all during the edit, and it was all happenstance that all happened. So we don't, like, and when it comes to the docs, we just don't have a blueprint really for how they're going to play out. I know Santino was at the office on Thursday. Santino is he's the special effects head for STM. And then he's also like the director/editor of Paranormal Unexplained and On the Trail of Hauntings. He was over, and we were just going over like my ideas for the effects shots for Rougarou, and we actually were able to, like, because of that, we were able to nail down how the first like 10 minutes of the movie are going to go. The movie, you know, the doc's already filmed, but we had this big found footage style cold open I want to do, but we also want to tie it into this really unknown origin legend for the Rougarou. I mean, almost completely unknown. You never find this anywhere, but I was trying to figure out how to nail that down, and it all just came together because of talking to him about how to structure the effects. So every project's different, but the one thing that I think holds true for every SDM project is that they are not really planned
Mm.
in advance. There's a lot of spontaneity.
Yeah, that's so cool. And how many hours of footage do you think you have per documentary that you then edit down to create what is the final form of it?
On the Trails are anywhere from like 25 to 50 hours. I mean, like On the Trail of Bigfoot, the journey, because you're talking like maybe 3 or 4 cameras, sometimes even more. And a lot of those are running for multiple hours. So I would say On the Trail of Bigfoot, the journey, wouldn't surprise me if it's like 35, 45 hours in that neighborhood. But like a doc like Rougarou, you know, I mean, if you're splitting out, if you want to, all the individual interviews are going into 3 different cameras, and then you've also got, you know, probably a few hours of B-roll per camera. So something like that is probably 20 hours of total footage. That doesn't include obviously like recreations, and Rougarou is going to be a lot like Bell Witch in that there's going to be extensive recreations on that one. So by the time it's all said and done, it's probably 25 hours on that movie, 25, 30 hours.
Oh, awesome. And like going way back before STM and stuff, what kind of grabbed your interest in cryptids and things for the both of you? Because I remember when I was little, my mom had this huge like tome of an encyclopedia that for some reason had like everything about werewolves and vampires, and there was a whole section on Bigfoot, and I've never been able to find that, but I've got the copy still, but I've never been able to find it anywhere else. So I have no idea where she got it from. But that was kind of what got my interest in all that. But what was your first stepping stone into this world?
Adrienne, I'm more interested in hearing this.
Well, for me, I mean, I had some knowledge of cryptids. When I was in high school, one of my science teachers is like super into cryptids. So like any chance he got, he would somehow like introduce like Bigfoot or another cryptid into our learning plan. I don't know how he managed to do this. We watched the X-Files movies in class. Like he was super into it. So that was probably like where I got like my first introduction to it. My dad was really into UFOs. So we had a lot of documentaries about that at home. But I honestly, it was dating Seth that really kind of pushed me deep into the subject, just because I was constantly hearing about it and watching things with him. So Seth is mostly to blame for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. there was I was never where I first became aware of even like the word paranormal was through John Keel's Mothman Prophecies book, and that's just because my sister had a thing for Richard Gere and went to see the movie. I mean, we all went to see the movie, but she saw the movie and loved it and bought the book. And I remember picking up the book, and she talked to me about the book and how people believe in UFOs and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's wild. And so I remember that, but it wasn't until like maybe 2007 or 2008 before I got into it. And that was because a buddy of mine thought I was already interested in this stuff just because he thought it was pretty weird. So he had and he was into Bigfoot stuff and all this kind of stuff. So he had burned a bunch of it to a DVD and gave me a DVD, and I watched it, and there were all these documentaries about, you know, lake monsters and UFOs and all this kind of stuff. And that kind of got me interested. And then I worked a medical billing job, and I had a lot of free time to just listen to podcasts, and I listened to some of the earliest UFO and paranormal Bigfoot podcasts out there. I listened to, so I was listening to like Jim Harold and Sasquatch Experience, which is funny because I'm friends with Sean Forker now, but like all those early day paranormal podcasts, I was like sitting at work just devouring that stuff for hours. So that's how I got into it.
Well, that's so cool. And like, what do you think it is about cryptids? Like, I think it's weirder for me being like UK based that I'm like obsessed with like Champ, because I have no idea where it is in the States, but I know that there's a giant sea serpent in a lake in America somewhere. And I've had those books where I've just been obsessed with those things. But do you think it's where these rural towns or these towns in America where they have certain cryptids or monsters that it's just formed this legend? What do you think is this like appeal for Bigfoot that even reaches worldwide?
I think it's just the thought that there's still some mystery out there. And probably the romance of it, just believing that there's something still, I mean, that's for like, because I love lake monsters. That's like my big thing, lake monsters and sky squids. And for me, I want to believe that they're there, because the idea that there's some dinosaur or something that's still surviving out there that we're not like really seeing would just be incredible to me. I want it to be true.
Yeah, I think in some ways On the Trail of Bigfoot, the journey is about that, but I think on a micro level, it's about the fact that when you go out into the woods, it's just more fun to think that you might be walking around and having the unknown. It really is. Like it's that simple. There were people who wouldn't spend a minute in the woods if we knew 100% none of this stuff was real. But those people, because there's the possibility that they might have an encounter with the unknown, they go out and enjoy time in the outdoors that they might not otherwise do. I think on a bigger, like psychological level, I think the world sucks, and these subjects give people a much needed escape from the terrible disaster that is the current state of the world that we live in. And it's also something that connects people. I mean, like people with varied political backgrounds and religious beliefs and all that stuff, they get together and enjoy this subject still. And it is strange. Like I'm a member of the NAWAC, which is like a Bigfoot group that goes out and tries to prove that Bigfoot is real. And I've seen firsthand, like that group could not be more varied in terms of political ideologies and religious beliefs and things like that. And yet those guys will go out in the woods and that group's the best example of this, because they're so, there's a very like military mindset when it comes to how they approach going out there. There's like everything scheduled out. They're out there for X amount of days or whatever. They have to be there's a brotherhood that goes on amongst, and I'm not saying that because it's all dudes, it's not. There's quite a few ladies in that group, but like they're out there together in this area, and they're doing that because of a fascination and a love of these subjects. So I think it's a little bit of that, and a little bit of, we just love mystery. We love the idea that there still is mystery too.
And when you're on these shoots and doing On the Trail and things, has there ever been like going through your mind of you hear a noise or something happens and you not necessarily shit yourself, but you go, oh fuck, like is that what we're actually looking for? Because I remember when I was little, the only real kind of myths we have in the UK, we have like smaller legends of Bigfoot, but they aren't really discussed. We have kind of like the Beast of Bodmin Moor, which is all related to big cats that have been let loose. I remember being a kid in Cornwall, and that's where the Beast of Bodmin Moor was. And my dad basically locking the car doors as I was trying to get him, being like, no, the beast's coming now. So run. And I was like, shit. And that was always, even today, if I go through somewhere like up like into Wales and I go through a forest and I hear like a stick break weirdly or something, I'm like, fuck. But has anything gone through your mind while you've been on shoot to, go against like your beliefs, or is it like maybe finding proof or something that's like, confirmed?
Well, I mean, I think
the first Bigfoot.
Yeah, On the Trail of Bigfoot, episode 5. I mean, everything that happened there sort of shifted my worldview as far as Bigfoot. Like I'm pretty firmly in the camp that Bigfoot exists at this point, because I've experienced things that really defy explanation. Even filming On the Trail of UFOs this past November, half our crew claims to have seen a UFO. and it's actually how Dark Sky opens. So I don't know. Other than that, though, it's like it seems like no, like mostly we're out. And I think with something like Rougarou or even like Beast of Whitehall, it's a little different from the On the Trail of stuff, and that's because when we're making On the Trail of projects is about actually being out trying to find something, whereas with the films, we're not out there trying to find a Rougarou. We're out there
We're just documenting.
We're documenting the folklore around it, and we've done so many movies now that when we're out there, I don't even find myself thinking or looking for like a Rougarou. Honestly, I was more interested in like trying to see a Bigfoot while we were down in those swamps, just because I was like, man, this seems like the perfect habitat because there's no one out. But yeah, we just very rarely do we have those experiences, and especially so with hauntings, which I think anyone watching On the Trail of Hauntings will know. Like so far,
Seth saw some ghost hair though.
It's not, you say that, but it doesn't make any sense. It sounds like
I'm not the one who saw it.
I saw a head. I saw hair on a head moving. It's a whole thing.
That's one of the interesting things I like about this and what I'm looking forward to on the trail of things. Like I've always kind of imagined if I was ever doing a Bigfoot documentary, something worst case scenario, I don't find Bigfoot, or like best case scenario I do, but then those could flip really fucking quickly depending on what Bigfoot's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I always think of like the Willow Creek film.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, that is one thing. When I had the rock throwing incident, it's hard to explain that, but in that 1 second, the rock throw was, if it had just been a rock throw, I would have left thinking that could have been an acorn or a nut falling out of it, like the power of how hard it hit the roof, the tin roof. But the thing is that what we heard following it, the whoop and then the laughter, was so inhuman and human all at once that I've never been able to. Like when I say my worldview shifted, it literally did, but it did in that second, and that's what's just almost like a switch was flipped when it happened. And there was a moment when it happened where I'm like, whatever that is sounds awfully big. And I wasn't scared. I've talked about this before. I wasn't like scared. It sounded like what I was hearing was a natural animal in its natural environment, but at the same time, there was also the thought in my head, like, that sounds really big, like in a really big ape running around the woods. If you really think about that, if that thing was in a bad mood, it could destroy me. So
it's a weird thing where it's like, if you go, do you want to go to the woods and look for Bigfoot? You go, yes. But it's like, do you want to go into the woods and try and find a 10-foot gorilla? No. Like it's a really interesting perspective. I think that when I've seen those type of documentaries and watch those things, there is a part of me that goes, I don't know if I'd have the balls to step into like the woods.
Well, I'm really excited because in 2 weeks I'm taking a group of people who my wife's going. I'm taking Aaron Gaskin who works with us. I'm taking his wife's going. We're going to it's a big group. It's like 10 of us. We're going to the Olympic Peninsula, and we're going to go up to these sites where they found these nests that they believe are made by Bigfoot, and they've also had sightings at these nest sites. And I'm really excited because it would be, Adrienne's pretty skeptical of this stuff. So is Aaron. So is Aaron's wife. A lot of the group that is going are fairly skeptical. And I know what that was like because that was me 2 years ago. And I would just love to be there with them if something happened. Because like you said, like the reality of it is very different from the folklore, the stuff that it's very different from when you're out there and something actually does happen. Like it's not a ghost hunting show. It's not Ghost Adventures. Like when the reality meets the myth, the world shifts around you, and it's really, really an experience that I hope we can all sort of have together. I would love for something, anything, like whether it's a scream or like a sound or a sighting, even like anything that happens. I just hope that like, I just really want Adrienne to be there and have something to happen, because I'd be very excited to see how she responded to that.
That would be awesome. And have you come across like animals while you've been out, like bears or mountain lions? I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, some of these places we're in are pretty terrifying. Like we were just down in Louisiana, nonstop alligators. I mean, the entire time there were alligators everywhere. We saw at the first place we filmed B-roll, we saw 3 alligators and multiple snakes. And I did see like my first out in the wild 10+ foot long alligator while we were there. So, I mean, that was pretty intense. But as far as like situations where things could have gotten hairy, we were actually, when we were in the Olympic Peninsula the last time back in 2018, it was Mark Matsky and I, and we were out there with a guy named Shane Corson hiking up this hill. It was just the 3 of us, and Mark and I kept hearing what we thought was a baby crying, and which in the woods is a terrifying thing. But like we kept hearing it, and Shane was like, I said something to Shane about it. He's like, all right, everyone stop moving. We hunkered down, and we could hear something moving through the underbrush ahead of us, maybe like 20 feet. It was real close. And Shane got down on his hands and knees and is peeking through the underbrush, and he looks back at us and he's like, oh, it's a mountain lion. And so that was like one of those incidents where it could have gotten pretty shady pretty quick. But as far as bear, we haven't really encountered bear. I don't even know that we've seen a bear on an STM shoot yet. We've definitely been in areas, and we're gonna, when we're in the Olympic Peninsula, we're gonna be in an area where there are bear, black bear and grizzly. But I doubt we'll see that kind of stuff. What we want to watch out for the most is like poisonous spiders, because we've encountered those.
Yeah, you encountered some
two black widow. Yeah, in our tent in Oklahoma. And then rattlesnakes are pretty nasty. Copperheads, snakes are a danger no matter where we go. And that's about it. Like most of the other stuff is going to get out of your way. So it'll be.
It's still a little concerning. I mean, I was pretty concerned with the Louisiana shoot. I didn't go on that, but Seth took our 15-year-old nephew with them, and I was pretty worried for that.
Yeah, I mean, that one was kind of dicey. I kept on him like, you just have to make sure you're watching the ground, because snakes they blend in, and like next thing you know, you're stepping over a copperhead, which is something that happened on Boggy Creek Monster. One of our guys walked right over a copperhead and never even saw it. Back in July of last year during the Bigfoot, the Journey shoot, we were up on top of Mount Hadley, and in the movie, it's this very like emotional kind of moment. It's like a culmination of a lot of different things, but in the reality of it, I mean, there was that emotional aspect to it, but moments after the emotional crescendo, I was standing somewhere by myself, just I think, like pondering life's great mysteries or something, staring off. And I looked down at my foot, and literally my foot was the toe of my shoe was almost touching a rattlesnake. And it was it was right there. I mean, like, and I guess I just wasn't paying attention. I mean, like, that's like the biggest danger. And the scary thing in that kind of situation is we were 2.5, essentially like a 2.5 mile, 3 mile hike straight up this mountain. So to get down after getting bit is going to be a chore. And you might not make it out alive. So that kind of stuff happens a lot. And, thankfully so far we've been blessed to not run into any serious,
knock on wood.
Yeah. No, that's incredible, because it's with that kind of like what you guys do, you like the obvious kind of main idea or the main like thought of danger is, whatever you're trying to find, but then the list just runs down, and my hat's completely off to you guys for going out there. And do you purposely pick anyone who's like, you can outrun when you go on these trips?
No, no, because I'm the guy that definitely would be like the slowest and probably die in every situation. But I do try to pick people occasionally. Like I didn't for Louisiana, but like it's always good to have like Alexander Petikoff with us because he's kind of an outdoorsman. He's usually armed.
Well, Aaron armed.
Aaron was armed for Louisiana, but I mean, it's usually just like you want to have someone in your group who can handle a situation if things get out of control. Especially with like wildlife. But I mean, that isn't always the case. I mean, there were a lot of shoots where the crew was like myself and Zach and Jason, which, I mean, you could not have three people more ill-equipped to survive.
No, that's crazy. Just on a tangent, have you read Max Brooks' latest book, Devolution?
I haven't. I wanted to check it out, but like I said, my reading. But it does look cool.
Yeah, if you can get a chance to get the audiobook, I'd really recommend that, because that's kind of, the worst case scenario of running into a big feat.
Right. Well, I mean, what's weird about it is I've heard about that book, and it reminded me of like when I first got into Oklahoma, into Area X, they sat us down and had this whole talk with us about what happens if someone kills a Bigfoot while we're there. And it was, again, it wasn't, it wasn't as scary as,
and sad.
Yeah, it's weird because they were talking about like what happens if you take a young, or like what happens if you kill a Bigfoot and then the rest of the Bigfoots come for us, and like how you transport. They have a freezer and a cooler for like keeping a part of the body if they need it. So yeah, when I read about that book, it actually really reminded me of being in Area X.
No, that's crazy. I'd really, if you get a chance to, because I really like whatever they do with like, I really love the World War Z audiobook they did with like the voice cast, and this, it has I think, is it Julie Greer and Nathan Fillion are two of the main cast members of the audiobook, but I'd really recommend that. But with traveling across American things, what's kind of been the longest drive or like the longest trek you've had to get to a film shoot?
Arkansas, right? Or Louisiana?
No, Louisiana was way farther. I mean, yeah, if you're talking about actually driving to a place, I mean, it was Louisiana, but we drove over 17 hours just to get there. And then once we were there, unfortunately, we were situated so far out and down on the coast that to get to any spot, we basically had to drive a minimum of 40 minutes, but usually more like 2 hours. So there was a ton of driving. We put like 3,500 plus miles on the rental car. So that was intense. And then I think that probably the southwestern desert portion of On the Trail of UFOs is a close second, because we actually spent just hours in the car driving from Vegas down to Phoenix, from Phoenix to Sedona to Area 51, back to Vegas. It was a ton of drive time on that trip too. And then like Arkansas.
And when we did Boggy, you went back and forth to Arkansas like 3 times.
Yeah, I've been down there 3 or 4 times. I hate that drive. It's so boring.
And like when you're driving and things, are you listening to podcasts, or do you have like favorite bands that you're listening to and things?
I usually listen. There's a podcast called The Complete Guide to Everything, which is these two dudes just kind of talking about nonsense. And I became
You're really selling it.
It's weird because like we listened to the show, the rest of the crew kind of likes that show too. So it's one of those things where we can all agree to listen to it. But it was weird because I've been listening to that show since I started in medical billing, doing that show for 12 years.
Yeah,
or
it's been a long.
And I've listened to them almost since they started. And then one day I was listening to an episode, and Tom Reynolds, one of the co-hosts, started talking about how he was watching a documentary about the Mothman. And started talking about it, and I slowly realized he was talking about our movie.
Oh, no way.
And so I ended up messaging him and sending him some stuff, some copies of our movies. And now he like backs our Kickstarter.
Yeah, really
awesome.
He backs Kickstarters and watches our stuff and all this. So it's kind of weird. But I listen to Complete Guide to Everything, and then I listen to a lot of like early 2000s emo music, like Get Up Kids and Alkaline Trio and the stuff I listened to when I was. My music tastes don't change.
No,
I've listened to.
Set in his
I've listened to Jimmy
90s.
Eat World for 25 years, and I'm not changing any.
Nice. And like with obviously you've had like those type of people backing you and stuff. When did you kind of realize you had this community that was supporting you? Like, was there a change obviously with Mothman climbing the charts for Amazon? Was there a switch where you went, oh, there's people who are not only willing to watch this, but invest and put money down for us to carry on doing these projects? When did that kind of turning point happen? Was that around 2017 as well?
Well, we've done Kickstarter campaigns since Minerva, so it started then, and we were definitely I think our first goal on our first Kickstarter for Minerva was like $500 or something. It ended up raising $6,000, and we were beside ourselves. We just couldn't believe it, and that feeling has never really gone away. I mean, this year in particular, when we launched the Kickstarter, I mean, immediately we just had people backing at our executive level, and it's crazy. It's always crazy to us that there's people that are that willing to support us, and of course we're extremely thankful for it. But a lot of times it's the same people coming back every year to support at those really high levels, and it means a lot to us, and I think it just makes us more determined to do the best work we can, and to do new things and put out quality films.
Yeah, and I think like because of that, we also realized at some point that people like watching us do what we do, and like so like that was kind of the idea behind Squad, which is the YouTube membership, and that is primarily like behind the scenes content. Even On the Trail of Hauntings is basically like watching STM wander around,
which is we're all ridiculous, so it's
so like the community grew. I mean, the community started with the first movie and just grew from there, so that's been wild too.
So cool. And with kind of the community growing, was it creating the podcast and YouTube channel was to kind of not necessarily reward, but to give people more things to listen to, or was it you created those things to then try and widen your audience? So was it a mix of both?
Well, I mean, Bubby's gonna start barking. Yeah, the Sasquatch was kind of like the first podcast we did, and we did Sasquatch before we even made Minerva.
Yeah.
So Mark and I used the podcast just as a way to get back to like having an excuse to hang out every week and talk. And yeah, I mean, I think there's an element. It's weird too. Like we didn't really plan on Monsteropolis or the new like Squadcast show. We didn't plan on those being part of Squad when we started it. Monsteropolis kind of came in, and then Squadcast came in, and now we've got those two podcasts on there. We might be launching another podcast over on the YouTube channel later this year with Heather. So I think we know that people like the behind the scenes stuff, and we
have a lot.
Yeah, and we like making it as the other part of it. I've always been a huge behind the scenes guy. There's a YouTube channel called Film Riot, and Ryan Connolly, the guy there, makes short films, and whenever he makes a short film, he'll do these really extensive kind of production diaries where someone just films basically every angle of the production, and then they release it as these like 3 or 4 hour long reels of behind the scenes stuff. And I know there's people that would watch that and be bored out of their minds, but I think there's just as many people that are like me that love watching that kind of stuff. And that's kind of like Squad is. I think that's kind of the impetus for all that, is giving people access to what it's like to actually be part of making this stuff. And the podcasts have just kind of like fallen in under that.
Awesome. I was listening to your latest podcast, and was there something to do with the YouTube way that people can subscribe, or you were looking to move into Patreon, or is that you going to like maybe look at doing that as an additional thing, or
Yeah, the only reason I'm talking about that is just because we know that there have been issues with the YouTube membership where people join. You can't join on a mobile device, which is absurd. Like, because most people are looking at, I mean, not most people, but a lot of people are looking at,
while they're on their phones.
And it just seems silly to me that you can't just pull it up on your phone and join under a membership.
Yeah.
I mean, I really would prefer not to have to switch platforms at this point over to Patreon. I like the idea of Patreon, but we actually had sort of weighed our options here when we were starting. And Patreon was originally what we were going to do. The reason we haven't done it, and the reason I balk at it still, is we would be running 2 crowdfunding campaigns.
Yeah.
And so that kind of bugs me. I like the fact that with YouTube, people are paying for like a membership, and they know upfront, like, this is what you're getting. And then they're basically,
it's almost like a mini streaming service.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And we started talking about the memberships a couple of years ago. It was a long time coming, and our big concern was always that we didn't want anything to interfere with the Kickstarter campaign or make it feel like we're starting to do 2 things that are the same, but they're not the same. So when YouTube started, doing these membership platforms, it was kind of exactly what we were looking for. It's just, it's all new, so we're kind of figuring it all out as we go to some degree.
No, that's really interesting. Like, as a kind of musician, like, what I wanted to do was, kind of diversify. Obviously, with a big chunk of what I did was touring, which obviously went out the window last year. This week is a year of this podcast being a thing, and it was a way to kind of diversify and interest people. But like, using like what you guys have done, it's been interesting to see people go forward and how to bring like quality content to people, but also, callously generate income from it, make it into something that you can pursue at full time. So I've been really inspired by what you guys have been doing. Like, we're wrapping up. I don't want to keep it too long. Obviously, it's been over an hour now, but with kind of like, I saw the YouTube videos of you debunking footage and things. Do you get jaded by new videos or theories at all? Or is it like I was on a Nicolas Cage podcast recently, and whenever something happens with Nicolas Cage, these guys get sent that news article or that picture by like 1 million people. Is your phone blowing up when there's a new video or something and you're like, I've seen this 10 times already?
Yeah. That definitely happens a lot.
Yeah.
And we're the Bigfoot people that everyone knows, I guess. So anytime there's like a picture or something, we get it sent to us like 30 times.
Yeah, and what's weird for me, I actually have never been like super into that stuff. Like, what's the latest Bigfoot news? I don't really follow that kind of stuff. And it's interesting with this, like the show, the YouTube show, like that was an idea that Santino had. He's like, why don't we just sit down and watch paranormal evidence videos and comment on them? And I'm like, I don't watch paranormal evidence videos. So for me, it was just like, I didn't really care. I didn't love the idea when he approached me with it, is what I'll say. But over time, it's been fun doing, just because I like to sit down with Aaron and him, what they have to say about all this stuff. And I think, like, I don't think I'm jaded by that stuff. I just find that over time, it's so much of it is either there's no way, it's so much of it is just hoaxing or blatant hoaxing or just misidentification of something. So I've never really cared for that kind of stuff. But I think over time, if people will start sending us their own videos, that's what I really want to happen with that show. Like, I get that, like, right now,
like, I picked up something weird on my Nest Cam.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you think it is?
That's the kind of stuff I really want to get to with that show, because then it'll be less about us debunking things, because I don't really consider what we're doing just debunking everything.
The YouTube commenters don't like it either.
Yeah. but if we can get, they don't like anything. If we can get to that point with that show, I think that would be much more interesting, because then we're being sent stuff by people who have, I'm going to know some of those people, and a lot of those people have a more honest reason for why they would think that something is real or whatever.
No, that's really interesting. Like, I have a recent t-shirt design, and my main logo is a Bigfoot holding a guitar, so I get tagged in everything Bigfoot. But with like the video recently where it was the Dobby alien thing on CCTV, have you noticed, kind of, since you've been doing this for a while, have you noticed, as like TikTok and technology's got better for phones, like people are always trying to go viral? Have you noticed a rise in people trying to go necessarily viral or trying to make videos that prove or a ghost sighting? Has that increased, like, with the new technology of TikTok and things? Have you noticed?
I think there's less.
Really?
Yeah, that's my personal read on it, because I don't know if it's that there's less or
there's just a sea of
it's
it,
just
and less
so
stand out.
it's so saturated that there isn't anything standing out anymore. But to me, it seems like I can't remember the last time someone shared a Bigfoot video, like a recent Bigfoot video, where I thought where it was like capturing attention. Like, you think there was that skunk ape video from like maybe 2017 that was kind of interesting, and that was a long time ago, and that was the last time that something came out that really grabbed enough attention to where I actually paid any mind to it. So I think it might be that it's so oversaturated that there isn't anything that it's too hard to stand out from the crowd.
That's really, really interesting. And obviously I want to kind of wrap up. I don't want to keep you guys too long. What keeps you motivated throughout this with all the projects and things? Like, obviously you have a drive as it being like your job, but do you have a motivation when you wake up in the day to be like, this is what's driving me to do it outside of, your interests and things? It's just, with so many projects that you're doing, it must be hard to maintain that level of motivation and drive.
I think it probably largely stems from a desire that we just don't want to go back to what our life was like before. Right?
No, I mean, for me, well, sure, I guess that's part of it.
But
I'm not that scared about it. I've always talked about, like, I could go back to medical billing tomorrow and make it work. Like, I would listen to podcasts all day or something. That's fine. But no, I think for me, I'm still driven by learning more about story. And so, like, I think that was like the thing about making these movies that maybe opened my eyes to who I am, or what I do, or why I'm on Earth. And that's like, I'm a storyteller, and it doesn't matter if I'm doing that through writing for a local newspaper or making movies about Bigfoot and Mothman. Like, you approach it in the same way. You should approach it in the same way, with the same amount of seriousness and objectivity. And you should always be trying to find new ways to tell those stories. And so I think for me too, it's also an aspect of no one else has done what we're doing. And so, and that, I know that sounds like self-aggrandizing or whatever, but it's like, it is true. Like, I've looked, there's no one else that's ever built a production company around making content about the paranormal like we have. It just doesn't exist. It never has. And so I think for me, it's always like, well, what else can we do? Like, how
where can we take this?
Where can we take this next? Yeah. And I think there's an aspect of challenging ourselves to it that keeps me going as well. I mean, every day I'm supposed to be on a break. I took off Friday. I took off through Monday, at least, maybe Tuesday, because we're getting ready for like a really big shoot in about 2 weeks.
You just came back.
And I just came back from a really big shoot. I'm pretty beat, but like, even this morning I was sitting down here and I couldn't stop myself from coming up with like ideas and things I should be. And I'm like, and then I have to almost like physically restrain myself from like starting to act on the ideas I'm having. So I'm like, I should call this person and talk to them about this idea. And so that's almost every morning I have my brain floods up with ideas I should try implementing. So I don't know. I think those are the reasons for me. And then taking care of my family. We have 2 staff members now at STM. We have 2 employees, so I got to pay them. And so it's also just making sure that everyone doesn't go broke.
Starve.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really inspiring. And what I love is like it's both of you guys doing it and being able to bounce off each other. It's just a really cool thing, and it is like I've been into this kind of thing for ages, and like it isn't you are the only people doing this, multifaceted, all-encompassing, documentaries, podcasts, YouTube series about such a wide range of topics that I really can't thank you enough for doing it. Really, as a fan, this has been fucking awesome.
Cool, thanks, man.
But you've got everything coming through with it, like up to like Bigfoot the Discovery, and like is it November 2021? What's kind of your plans for the future going into like 2022 and onwards?
Well, 2022 we're making more movies. I don't know yet like what our schedule is for next year. I know what our movie is, and we'll make like a big announcement about that later in the year. But just making more movies, and then continuing to grow the YouTube stuff, free and the membership kind of and things. I think Beyond the Trail is going to be a lot bigger than maybe what people are thinking, if they're thinking about it at all. Because I think that series, Alex has been showing me updates of the pilot episode as he goes, and it's just unlike anything that's ever been made about the topic of Bigfoot. And at the same time, it ties into our films in a really cool way. So it's just such a cool. It's just going to be crazy when it comes out. The quality of it, and it's a free YouTube series, is going to. I think when people see it, they're going to be blown away by what it is, and especially when he works on the second episode, which is going to tie into the Discovery. It's going to be something really cool. And then doing more Paranormal Unexplained, and there's some other stuff we're going to relaunch Case Files and all that kind of stuff next year as well. So 2022, a crazy year. I just don't know yet how. I can guarantee you it'll be crazy. I just don't know what the exact schedule is.
Yeah, cool, man. I can't wait for it. But just before we go, has there been a cryptid or a myth or a legend that you've wanted to do that you haven't done yet because you haven't necessarily found a hook or a perspective for it yet?
There hasn't been, due to those facts. There are cryptids and paranormal topics that I would love to cover that I don't think we can in a film, because it would not be, and I hate to say this because it sucks, but it wouldn't be marketable. It's like one of I'd love to make a movie about the Dover Demon, but we can't, because it would be a 40-minute movie, and how am I going to sell it, and where is it going to come out? And that does suck. Like, I know when we made Beast of Whitehall, I made it for 49, or what was it, 40? It was 39 minutes. I wouldn't do that today. We wouldn't be able to make enough on it to even make the budget back. And that stuff bugs me, because I feel like I don't want to be constrained by those. I mean, I think everyone's like this, but I don't want to be constrained by those financial limitations and having to worry about that kind of stuff. But that's like, the reality is we're funding our own stuff. So you have to be aware of that, or we will go under. So there's been subjects that we haven't been able to cover because of that, but not because I couldn't find a hook.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. But, I'll let you guys go. And just, I wanted to say, like, obviously I know how busy you guys have been and, shooting things. So I really can't thank you enough for making the time to chat to me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Adrienne went upstairs because their son just woke up from his nap, but I'm sure she would express her thankfulness for being on the show as well. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate making the time, but I'll let you go. And I can't thank you enough for making the time for this. And I can't wait to see everything that you're bringing out this year. I'm a huge fan. I'm going to go back and try and watch as much of it as I can as well. And yeah, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, dude.
And there we have it. That's episode 32 of Into the Van, Into the Bag. I can't thank you enough for listening. Please go check out Small Town Monsters. What they are doing is incredible. You will definitely love it. You will find some stuff you didn't know about. You'll be entertained. And it's just an incredible journey to go on. Go check them out. yeah, just keep on supporting the stuff you love, guys. Keep finding the things that you want to love as well. It's important to discover stuff, and it's also important to tell people about the things you discover. Word of mouth is still the most important thing, so please, if you like this podcast, tell a friend about it. Leave me a review wherever you're listening to it. It's a massive help. And until next time, guys, peace.